Welcome everybody. Welcome to Back to Basics D&O Liability for Community Associations webinar. I'm Kevin Davis Insurance Marketing Manager, Sherry Branson. I'm now joined by Kevin Davis, Kevin of Kevin Davis Insurance, and Kevin joins me from Los Angeles. Hey Kevin, good morning.
Hello, hey Sherry, how you doing?
Doing well, thank you, doing well. I've heard you've had gorgeous weather out there in LA.
Yes, I have to say that it's been in the 70s, 81, 82. It's in February, and it's been pretty good. But I can't say it's been cold because people in the East Coast know the difference in the cold is, and we don't. So I had a jacket on like for the past 2 weeks, and
yeah. We're all jealous. We're all a little bit jealous because it's beautiful weather. It's nice in Texas. I'm in Austin, Texas, everybody. And we have people from all over the country joining us today, Kevin. We have people from the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, and the South and the North. We have a good group. So welcome, everybody. And this is our second webinar of 2020. And I did want to mention, if anybody has any questions during the webinar, there is a questions box on the screen. You can type in your questions, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the webinar. And I record all of our webinars, and I put them on our website, which is kdisonline.com. And I also upload the PowerPoint from today's presentation into the handout section. So you can click on that tab and you can download it during the webinar. So feel free to do that if you'd like the handout. And if you'd like to get an application, to get a quote, our website again, one more time, is kdisonline.com. So Kevin, it's our second webinar of 2020, and we're going to talk about why community associations need D&O.
Yes, this is one of our Back to Basics series we do, like the first quarter of every year. Just kind of remind everybody why they need D&O or why they need crime or why they need cyber. Just to get an introductory idea. This is for people who really don't understand the importance of D&O for community associations. And that's pretty much our goal today, to really get into it. So by the time this little program is over, you'll get an idea of, okay, I get it. I know why my community associations need not only a D&O, but one of our D&Os, or a D&O especially made for community associations.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even for people who might be familiar with D&O already, it's always good to get a refresher and a reminder of the different claims that associations are seeing, and why there's a need for D&O. And now let's talk about, why they actually need it, Kevin. Let's talk about a few reasons why an association would even need D&O.
Sure. Okay, Sherry, you live in a homeowner association, right?
I do. Yes.
And it's a board of directors there that kind of tell you what you can do, what you can't do, right?
That's true. Yes. Yes.
You have rules, and you have rules and everything there also, right?
Yes. Yes. We have the CC&Rs, which I read about 10 years ago. So I really, I haven't looked at them in ages, and a lot of people do that. They receive their CC&Rs when they move into an HOA or a condo association, and they put them in a drawer, and then they kind of forget about them. So
that's exactly what the problem is. See, it's the board of directors' job is to enforce the rules and to maintain, enhance, and protect the community association you live in. So what happens is that whenever there's a person violating the rules, they get sued. Like, for example, you read your rules 10 years ago when you first moved in there. Now, all of a sudden, you want to go to the pool, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden, the pool hours are from 8 in the morning till 10. All of a sudden, you can't go to the pool. You're not happy about that.
Right. Exactly. Yes. You see situations like that regarding pools all the time. And I did have just a real life example that happened in my HOA. My neighbor went to LSU, and they were, he's a huge football fan of LSU football team, and they'd had such a great season this year. They won the national championship. So he was putting his flag out all the time, his LSU flag, and then he told me that the property managers had sent him a notice that he had to take the flag down, and he was kind of bummed out about that because he was a big fan,
And what happened in community associations is this: that all these rules, right, that everybody should obey, right? You don't obey them, and that's what creates the problem. See, you have nonprofit volunteers who live in this community, and their job is to enforce the rules. And the problem is that people don't want those rules enforced. They want to be able to go to the pool anytime they want to do. They want to play basketball anytime they want to play basketball. They want to park their car when they want to park it. They want to do all these things, and it's the job of the board to enforce the documents. And whenever they don't enforce the documents properly or uniformly, it creates a D&O lawsuit.
Mhm.
A second issue there is that you're looking at a board of directors there of condominiums. They're usually made up of inexperienced individuals with no knowledge, no experience, no idea how to run a multi-million-dollar corporation.
That's right. They're volunteers, Kevin. They're not, they don't realize that they actually are running a business.
And that's the point. If you look at a condominium that has 100 units, and 100 units are worth $100,000 a piece, that's a $10 million corporation they're running. Well, they don't look at it that way. And that's where the problem comes in for community associations. They're running a corporation, and they don't treat it as running like a corporation. They treat it as running it as a hobby or a social club.
Absolutely. A lot of these claims that we see are emotional based claims. They're emotionally charged, like my neighbor, he didn't file a claim over the flag, but he could have if he got really, some people do get really upset about a flag or something that they want to do that does break the rules in their HOA, and they decide to file a suit.
And it's kind of interesting because that brings up our next topic we're going to talk about here, where these claims originate from. And this is really important because right now you live in Texas, okay? So where Texas at, it's not really, you're going to see this kind of claim. Here's where the claims mostly come from. If you live on the East Coast, anywhere east of 95 from New England all the way down to the Florida Keys, if you live east of there, the likelihood that you have a claim is greater than anywhere else, other than if you live on the West Coast of I-5 from Canadian border all the way down to the Mexican border. If you live anywhere west of I-5, that's where your claim's coming in from. So if you live in that territory, guess what happens? If those flags are pointed out there, all of a sudden, if I'm telling you to remove those flags, I'm a board member, you're going to say, no, I'm not going to remove them. You don't have the right. You don't have the authority. You're arbitrarily enforcing the documents. You're discriminating against me. They have all these different reasons, and the rules are just unreasonable and unenforceable. So that's what happens. If you live east of 95 and west of I-5, that's automatically going to have a claim based on those simple things that we've seen. Now, you live in Texas, the likelihood of that is not as great,
14%, that's pretty low compared to the coastal areas. That's very low.
Yeah. So that's that's the problem right now. Most of our claims, 2/3 of our claims are going to come from that area. I mean, up in the East Coast and up and down the West Coast, California, Florida, New York City, in New England territories, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. That's where claims are coming from. The coast of South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, Hilton Head. The claims are there. If you come inland a little bit, Ohio, Michigan, not as bad. But it's still the same thing. They still see the same exposures as everybody else. The job of the board of directors is to enforce the rules. People get upset for not enforcing the rules. And they come back and say the rules are unreasonable, unenforceable, discriminatory. And when you see those names, boom, you got a D&O suit coming up.
Absolutely. Yeah, some areas of the country are just more lawsuit happy, and we have a lot of brokers that join us from the coastal section. So it's good to be aware of what types of claims are coming in and the fact that they live in a very area that's prone to lawsuits, very, very prone and a lot of claims. So that's makes these D&O policies that much more important to have. And now when we talk about D&O policies, Kevin, there's a lot of different, types of D&O policies that are out there. We have the package policies, we have the standalone policies. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. There is no standard D&O contract out there right now. They all have different terms and conditions, and you have to be really, really, really careful about a D&O policy. Historically, a D&O policy designed for a major corporation, okay, to protect the assets of the corporation. So if you sue the board, because now all of a sudden you have Apple stock and Apple decides to start selling clothes and they lose their money, that's why D&Os come into effect. Now, what's happened over the years, nonprofits started buying D&O insurance because, again, you have employees and nonprofits and you have employee wrongful terminations, you have discrimination. Now we're talking about something really specific, that is for community association. When you talk about D&O for community association, it's totally unique because of one really important reason. You live there. It's not like you go to work every day, you work from 9 to 5 or whatever time you work, and you go home and you relax. Here in a community association, if you want to go out and shoot baskets at 2 o'clock in the morning because it releases your stress, Some associations won't allow you to do that. And that's why you need something specific about D&O for community associations, because it answers claims that all the other policies do not do.
Mm-hmm. That are unique to community associations, like you said, playing basketball at night, flying the flag of your favorite football team, that kind of a thing. That's not going to happen in a corporation, and it's not going to be something to worry about. But that's why this particular D&O, well, we have a D&O that's customized for community associations, and that's what you really need, not just a regular D&O policy.
And it's important because we'll talk about that in the next slide. We'll talk about what makes a D&O for community associations a little bit different than a package D&O, and what makes the difference between all kinds of D&O. So, yeah, it's a fascinating thing. So let's talk about D&O insurance. When we talk about D&O insurance, okay, it's basically it protects the insured against a claim for a wrongful act against them during a policy period. So what does that mean? So three things that are really important. The first thing is who is an insured in the D&O policy. That is the most important. You got to know who it is. And in a community association, it's totally different than a regular D&O policy, because a regular D&O policy picks up directors and officers only. That's it.
Yeah, so you don't have much coverage in a regular.
Exactly. Now, in a condominium, a lot broader. You're talking about your committees, you're talking about your volunteers, you talk about the management company, you talk about the association itself. So who is insured is very broad. The second thing, and just as important, is it covers a wrongful act. And a wrongful act is a long definition of what wrongful act is, but if you look at the definition, there's only one word that means something, and that is any act. So if you are insured and you commit any kind of act, it is what a D&O really covers. And then the third thing is, what is a claim? So those three things are really, really critical to what D&O is. And we'll talk about what a claim is in a minute. But right now, you know you're insured because you're a volunteer acting direction of the board. I don't care if you're, and you got employees, you got committee members, you got that whole broad. And if that group of people commit any kind of wrongful act, which is any act itself. And those are acts we talked about before in terms of parking your car, and in terms of shooting baskets when you're shooting baskets, going to the pool hours. Those are things that consider a wrongful act by the people who live there.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very broad category. It covers a lot of things.
Now, this is the important part. So we take that definition of a D&O policy that we have, or versus a package policy. Now, if you look at what a package policy is, the insuring agreement, the same thing. They talk about a claim, wrongful act by any insured. The three things we talked about, but this is the key thing: obligated to pay as damages.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
So can you explain that a little bit?
Okay. When you look at any insurance policy out there is obligated to pay as damages because of a claim. For us, and if you go back, let's go back to the other insuring agreement, the one we just talked about, the D&O, the policy agreement. We're not talking about we're talking about for damages only. This is against a claim for a wrongful act against them during a policy period. It's just a claim. It doesn't say anything about damages or not, because now what we're going to do is to show now, if we look at the definition of what a claim is a demand for monetary or non-monetary damages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's the most important part of a D&O policy.
Because a lot of the claims in HOAs and in condo associations are not regarding money. They just like my neighbor who wanted to fly his flag, or somebody wants to play basketball or use the pool at 11 o'clock at night when it's supposed to close at 10 o'clock at night. So it's really the right to do something.
Exactly. And this is the most important part of D&O for community associations. We talk about the definitions on the policy. You need to know if it's an insured, a wrongful act, and a claim. But if they say they will pay only for damages, they don't say or non-monetary relief. then you're missing the majority of the D&O claims that are out there. Now, if you look at the definition of claim there's four. It's longer than four, but these are the four major ones. You got a civil proceeding, you got a criminal proceeding, a formal regulatory proceedings. The definition of claim is the key when you talk about D&O for community association. It has to be broader to just pay for damages. It has to respond to different things, including criminal proceedings. We had a situation in New York years ago where the board found criminally negligent by not installing proper window guards in the building.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So it's possible for it to be held criminally negligent. So you got to make sure that D&O policy is really strong enough to provide the coverage you need for your community association. What we have designed is a D&O policy for community associations, specifically for community associations, because we understand the particular exposures for the community associations.
Mm-hmm. And wasn't there a situation where somebody was running a business out of their condo unit, and then they weren't, of course, you're not supposed to run a commercial business out of a condo unit, and there was a fire or something happened, and the person that was running the illegal business, or not illegal, but against the association rules, CC&Rs, he sued the association because they let him run the business.
Exactly. Which brings up our next topic. We'll talk about claims. And this is again, when we talk about D&O claims for community association, this is it. This is the chart that tells you where all the claims are coming from. And the reality is 2/3 of all the claims, 2/3 of all our claims, you're talking about breach of fiduciary duty, you're talking about restrictions, you're talking about breach of contract, they're all coming from non-monetary damage claims. But basically, the board breach of fiduciary duty, like you talk about a person who's selling jewelry inside their unit, and a person came in and set a fire to the unit, all of a sudden sued the board of directors because the board did not enforce the documents properly.
Mm-hmm. So the board got sued even though that person was breaking the rules. So that's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
So
not enforcing the rules, that's a big problem.
Again, this is all your problems. 2/3 of all your problems in the condominiums, community associations, you're looking at them right there. Breach of fiduciary duty, about 25%, almost a quarter of them. And then it goes on from there. And we'll talk about each one of these in a second. But it's important to understand that when we talk about community association D&O losses, this is it. Because claims on here only will respond to community associations. If you happen to work in a non-for-profit library or foundation, you don't have situations like CC&Rs. You don't have somebody coming in and saying going to play basketball or go swimming. These are only related to community associations.
Very, very unique types of claims. Absolutely. And then now we're going to talk about some examples that we've seen, everybody, for breach of fiduciary duty, the big
Let's talk about
I did want to mention one more time that the questions box on the screen, if you have any questions about what we're going over right now, please type your questions in and then we'll answer the questions at the end. And if you'd like this PowerPoint presentation, which has some really good claims examples in it, just click on the handouts tab and you can download it there. Okay, so Kevin, breach of fiduciary duty. Let's talk about that a little bit.
24% of all our claims breach of fiduciary duty. The board of directors have a responsibility to act in the best interest of the association. That's their job. So whenever they do not act in that interest, guess what happens? They get sued. They get sued. You breach of you didn't act in the best interest of the association. For example, if I decide to put new roofs on an association, and I go to my brother-in-law who's a roofer, and you get a special deal from him. It's not a problem with that, but you got to let everybody know. Self-dealing is a major problem in a lot of these community associations where somebody trying to get kickbacks or somebody trying to get a special deal done because they're related to the person who's putting the deal together. I mean, just think of all the different people who come in contact with community associations. Not only just the unit owners live there, but all the contractors come there, the roofer, the landscaper, the management companies, the pool people. They keep coming in, they come in. And what happens is whenever there's a situation where the board doesn't do the job they should be doing, you have a breach of fiduciary responsibility lawsuit. And 24% of all our claims is because of that one area, breach of fiduciary duty.
And here's an example. I'll just mention this one that we have up where an association has some delinquent owners. They requested their attorney to foreclose on the unit for non-payment of assessments. The board president is an investor. He's a real estate investor, ended up using his position on the board to find out about the time and the location of the sale. So he bid on the property and then he bought the unit, and then he ended up getting sued for breach of fiduciary duty. So there's lots of different situations where they can be sued for that. So that's why this is the most common claim that we see.
Self-dealing, that's what that was, self-dealing. The second, okay, the violation, covenant conditions and restrictions. These are the CC&Rs. These are the rules that you live by in a community association. These are the ones that you saw 10 years ago, you haven't seen since then?
That's right, you haven't seen him in 10 years, exactly. I wouldn't be able to answer probably maybe one of them.
Yep. And the problem here, and this is why it's such a big deal, and it only impacts community associations. And on top of it, these are emotionally driven lawsuits that we're not suing because we want $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000. We're suing because of one reason. We think the board of directors are incompetent, they're illiterate, they understand the rules and regulations, and we want a judge to tell us that they are incompetent. They aren't educated, they don't have the knowledge, they shouldn't even be on the board. They're not for money. So when we talk about damages, most of your violation CC&Rs do not involve damages. The big issue right now in violation of CC&Rs is pets, right? Comfort. That's the big ones, right? That's one of your favorite topics, right?
Exactly. Pets. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a big area. Absolutely. Yeah, different size pets, people have comfort pets, all that kind of a thing. I mean, it's just this really could go on and on. There's so many different pet claims that associations see. And then even painting like a color of a house a certain color. A lot of people don't realize, this claim that we have up right now, that there's an approved list of colors that a lot of these associations have. And if somebody's not aware of that, and they paint their house pink or purple or whatever, and they don't get approval for the different color, then they could get in trouble right there.
And we see these kind of claims whenever the economy starts improving. When the economy starts improving, people want to expand their houses. They want to put up a new fence. They want to rebuild their pool. They want to put a deck in. They want to do all these different things. And guess what? They have to go before the board first. And because they don't go before the board first, they're in violation of the covenant conditions and restrictions. Another problem comes in here is a situation is that it's called arbitrary enforcing of the rules. And one of the big issues there, not only with pets, we talked about comfort pets already, we talk about parking. One of the big issues in community association is parking. People want to park where they want to park at. So if I have a unit, if I'm sitting right on the ground floor, my unit's there, but I can park 3 steps over, I'm going to park in front of my place because I feel like I should be able to park. And if my mom was come by, she should be able to park next to it. Well, what happens is visitors parking may not be there. So all of a sudden, guess what happens? So they start to enforce the documents on my parents, but they don't enforce the documents uniformly against everybody. So you have a big issue here with lack of uniformity or arbitrary enforcement of these documents. The arbitration of it creates major problem for community associations because they do not enforce their rules uniformly. Therefore, some people will come up and file a lawsuit saying they were uniformly not enforced and were unenforceable, and that creates a big problem also.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to the next one. My favorite one.
Talk about breach of contracts.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it earlier, the landscapers, the painters, you've got attorneys that you've signed a contract with. I mean, you've got these contracts that are being signed. So, somebody might not be happy with the landscaper and decide to fire them in the middle of their contract. And that's where this claim came from. The landscaper ended up suing the association because they didn't fulfill their contract. So
this is an interesting one here. My favorite one, because the reality is that we, as board of directors of condos, they enter the contracts all the time. And again, emotionally driven reasons why they get out of contracts, especially management company contracts or roofer contracts. They take too much time. They're not doing the job they should be doing, even though there's a contract in there. And the interesting thing about D&O policies are D&O policies should not pick up breach of contract claims. And most of them don't, because guess what? It's not a accident to stop a contract. It's a deliberate act. If I painted the entire complex, I say I'm not going to pay it because I don't like the color you painted. Well, you received the benefit of that already.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not really an insurable situation. So what we do, and most of our competitors do, and you have to make sure if there's a breach of contract claim, defense cost is covered under it. You got to make sure you at least get defense costs, because you can't have judgments or else you have board of directors violating contracts all along. We think it makes sense to provide defense costs, because sometimes they don't like the job they did. Sometimes the job should have been done a little better, or the contract was not written the way it should have been written. So our breach of contract claims, we see them, and it's a major problem, because again, when these board members enter in a contract, they usually don't have a lawyer looking at the contract first, people reviewing the contract. It just becomes a little more complicated than it needs to be.
And they don't pick up the phone if they decide to fire the landscaper or fire that painter. They don't pick up the phone and call their lawyer and say, if I choose to fire this person, could this be a problem? They don't even think. They just fire that person, and then the lawsuit comes in later.
Yeah, exactly. Breach of contract, one of the things I hate more than because that's one thing can be avoided. Don't breach a contract, and then I don't have to pay. What's this, like? What's the percentage of my claim? I mean, I hate this one. This is what I don't like. Because this one can be avoided. This is that one claim that can be avoided. So anyway, let's go to this one. Number 4.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about discrimination. And Kevin, we have a claim up here on the screen that a homeowners association paid $156,000 to settle a disability discrimination lawsuit. The HOA paid more than $150,000, but to a family who said the HOA unfairly barred them from building a therapeutic sunroom where their 2 children who happened to have Down syndrome could play and receive physical therapy. So this was over a disability and over the sunroom, a therapeutic sunroom. So that's a rather large claim.
Yeah, and we're talking about here is non-employment discrimination. Non-employment discrimination is a major problem for community associations for one reason, is that, and we just talked about arbitrary enforcing of the document. So if you have a rule that you can't park, you can't have a pet, what happens is you come back and say, you're discriminating against me because I'm a protected class. Not because I happen to be that one person association nobody likes. No, you are actually discriminating against me, and you should not. I'm being treated unfairly. That's the problem with discrimination in community association. We're not talking about housing discrimination. We are not talking about employment-related discrimination. We're talking about discrimination based on what you're doing and how you're enforcing the rules. You're enforcing the rules, you're not enforcing the rules uniformly. So as a result of that, now all of a sudden I'm a protected class. So I'm suing you not only because you are I violate the CCNRs, but I'm also a protected class. So I'm throwing discrimination on top of it. Really tough situation right here. Because, we live in the community, so we live in a world now, I call it the 50-50 world, where 50-50 people are on one side and the other 50 on the other side. So whenever you have, a situation that develops in a community association, half people will be happy, half people not going to be happy. And so associations right now, we're going to see more and more discrimination type suits because of just the interaction of people who live there. Half the people are not going to like the other half of the people, And they're not going to say I don't like you because your political beliefs. They're going to say I don't like you because I am a protected class, and this is why you're treating me this way. I see it as a problem for community association. Make sure you have discrimination coverage under your D&O policy. It's really, really important.
Okay, great. And now we're going to talk about some other common types of claims, everybody. Employment, we were just talking about discrimination, and now EPL, employment practices liability.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit, Kevin.
Well, this is an interesting one too. If you have employees, we're going to see, this is going to be a big deal. Most community associations out there do not have employees, so it's not a major factor. But if you do have employees, it's something major, because most of these community associations do not have HR departments. So telling them that, you know what, you can't fire somebody who's 72 years old unless he can't do his job anymore. He doesn't look as good as somebody who's 34 years old, 40 years old. Not a good reason. That's what happened in the situation right there.
Okay. Yeah. So this is why it's important, if an association does have employees, to have EPL coverage. And we see claims in that all the time. And then there's a lot of other categories that come in. So let's go down. We've got a list coming up here on the next slide. Insured versus insured, mismanagement of association funds, wrongful foreclosure, architectural violations, and then noise complaints.
Yeah, if you look at these things right now, These are really something like the insurer versus insurer complaints. Most D&O policies will not pick up if the present board sues the old board. So they won't pick up one insurer versus another insurer. Make sure that that doesn't happen. Mismanagement association funds, they always accuse the management company of stealing money. They always do. And so what they're saying is that, well, the money is missing, so we assume you sold it. You see it a lot. Wrongful foreclosure is a big deal, and a lot. It's not so much big now because the economy has picked up, but a few years ago, that downturn in the economy, wow, we saw a lot of wrongful foreclosures, especially in your backyard. We saw a lot in Texas.
Yes, yes, and judicial, non-judicial foreclosures. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, and it's a good idea to speak to the attorney, the association's attorney, to make sure you're doing it properly, because there's a lot of rules and regulations and paperwork that has to be filed. So you don't want to just randomly or just decide to foreclose on a property. You want to do it right.
Yeah.
And then architectural violations, I'd like to talk about one of my neighbors for this one. He decided to build like a tool shed, next to his house, but he never checked with our board and never checked with the association. So he built the whole thing, and then they told him he had to take it down. So he had not gotten approval, from the board. So he was really upset about that.
Yeah. And again, those we see all the time, because again, if you would look at the rules, he would see that all he has to do is go before the committee and say, this is what I want to do, get approval for it, and he wouldn't be in that situation at all. This last one here, the noise complaint, we see that a lot, especially at any kind of high rises, not just like your kids running up and down the stairs and things like that, but we see it from elevators and we see it from air conditioning units. That seems to be, makes a lot of noise there.
And hardwood floors. I know for a while there, we were seeing a ton of claims with people who lived in condo associations and lived above somebody, like the upper levels, and they took the carpeting up and put down hardwood floors. So we saw a few complaints, a few claims regarding hardwood floors and the noise that they make, etc. So there's a lot of different areas when people are living in the same building or living next to each other where claims can come up. And we touched upon a lot of them today. And now we're going to talk about a helpline. This helpline that's coming up can be accessed by any current travelers insured with a community association management liability policy. And the number on the screen is 855-548-8656. So if somebody has a traveler's CAM policy, which is a D&O policy, they can call this helpline Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and speak to an attorney and get 1 hour of free advice regarding whether they think they may have a claim, a potential claim, or just basically some legal feedback. So this is a great resource for you to offer your customers when they do get a traveler's policy. This is really a good resource for people to use.
To ask all these questions that we talked about earlier. What happens here is that, again, living in community association is unique. They're totally different than any other type of D&O out there because we live there. And because you live there, these situations are emotionally based, and people get upset constantly because you think, Sherry, that you're being mistreated, and you're being mistreated when everybody else is being treated fairly and are being done a lot better. So be careful. When you buy a D&O policy, make sure they're providing the kind of coverage we are talking about, because if they don't, you end up getting declinations on certain things that you should not be declined on. Oh, we just lost you. Lost our voice.
And it's in the handouts tab. So just click on that handouts tab, and then you can download PowerPoint. And I just want to see if any questions may have come in. Okay, I do see a question here, Kevin. Can you provide an example of a claim that you've seen that used the full policy limits?
Sure. Yes, question by Eric. Yes.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for the question.
Several claims there, the full policy limit. Well, you're talking about usually a mixed-use association. Mixed-use association where you have residential and commercial combined. When they start fighting, they will fight. And they will start debating over parking, the noise, if there's a restaurant, the smell, the people who are hanging around there. So usually mixed-use associations, we will see a large claim. We'll see large claims in high-end associations, meaning that if you happen to live in an area where you have high-end like New York City or Miami Beach or Fort Lauderdale, where you have a unit that's worth, $2 or $3 million. You will see large limit losses there. You will also see employment practices losses. That'll be pretty big because a lot of times these things are over time, and they've done something that's really, really pretty bad. One thing that we've seen a large loss on, and we saw it based on CC&Rs that were written 40, 50 years ago. And you see like CC&Rs written 40, 50 years ago, there's some discriminatory language in there. And all of a sudden you're looking in there and somebody went to move in there and they were declined to move in there, not because of the CC&Rs, but for other reasons. But boy, they looked at some old CC&Rs and there's some discriminatory wording in there. So be careful in situations like that. I mean, if you have old CC&Rs, I'm talking about 50 years ago, some things in there shouldn't be in there anymore.
Not appropriate, not. Yeah, that's a good reason to take a look at them every few years and revise them and have your attorney go over them just to make sure they're current and they're up to date and they're not violating anything and they don't get the association in trouble.
Yeah. One of the largest losses we had was based on outdated CC&Rs that were discriminatory.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. Yeah, well, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Eric, so much for your question. If anybody thinks of any other questions afterwards, feel free to send me an email. My email is sbranson@kdins.com. If you think of anything, just shoot an email over. And again, I put the recording of the webinars on our website, which is kdisonline.com. So feel free to listen to our webinar again. Thank you, Kevin, for a great webinar. Thank you for all the great information. And please join us in March as we do Back to Basics on cyber.
Yeah. Right. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great day.